Welcome to Beyond the Breakwater, where just beyond the crashing waves of fear, discomfort, and doubt lies the greatest potential for life transformation. We want to guide you into the open waters where the calculated risk you take becomes the turning point for you or your organization to thrive. So draw up your anchors and prepare for departure in this week's episode of Beyond the Breakwater.
Welcome back, everybody. We're really glad you're here for another episode of Beyond the Breakwater. And I'm here with Lyndsay. My name's Ed, and we've had an amazing conversation this last week about young adult ministry, and it's a new ministry that you've been doing. Lyndsay, I can't wait to hear more. And we're going to get into a little bit of some of the challenges that you faced with it too. So maybe if people didn't join us last week, can you give us maybe a brief version of what have you done this summer?
Yeah. So we had the last 2 months and this summer has been it's been a huge learning experience. It's been my socks being blown off by just like the Lord and what he's doing with young adults in Midland. We started a young adults group here in Midland, just a community-wide thing. It's not affiliated with a church. It's just a group of people coming together simply to just hang out and be, and like the prayer is that like life transformation would happen with it at the pace that it needs to happen at, whatever pace the Lord decides. And so we started it 3 months ago. We meet bi-weekly on Wednesdays at 6, and we've been in a neutral space, being the chapel is what we refer to it as, but it's Caregiving Network's offices. So they just provide resources in the community to lower income folks. It's been hosting grounds for other groups and things in Midland, like Foster Midland meets there, Open Door Homeless Shelter meets there. So there's a variety of things going on in this space, but it's been a really big gift to have the chapel as a place for us to meet. So it's been both for like believers and the unbelievers to come into one space and not have there's not like any type of hidden message behind what we're doing other than just like caring for and loving people. So we have things from like spike ball nights, board games, yard games. We did a Christmas in July party. That was interesting and a lot of fun. So yeah, it's been incredible to see who God brings. I think like the first night we had 25 people, second night we had 50 people, and now it's been hovering anywhere from like 25 to 40. But it's interesting because every single time we meet, there are probably like 10 core people that come, and it's like the rest are new every single time. And someone had just said to me this past week, they were like, if we could have everybody that's ever come in one room, that'd be a lot of people. Like I feel like probably over 100. So, yeah.
Okay, so let's go back. You said it's not affiliated with any church, and I know you're on staff at Messiah, but you made a choice not to have it Messiah's ministry, to be neutral in the community. Walk us through what the decision behind that was, and maybe here's the why I'm asking. Because if I'm a church leader listening to this right now, and you're saying, hey, church, you ought to think about a ministry, but it shouldn't be in your church, and it shouldn't be part of your church. That's almost going contrary immediately to every church leader. Like, what do you mean, start a ministry?
What's the point?
Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
So talk about the decision that you made not to be affiliated with a church. You have been affiliated with churches before in small group ministry, and there's been some challenges with this. So this whole episode is going to be getting into the realm of sometimes this is hard. So maybe talk about when churches have tried to do young adult ministry. What was that like, and why the decision to not be affiliated with a church?
Okay. Right off the bat, a thought just came in my mind of the point. Like it's like we say, okay, we're going to start a ministry out of the church. And if I were to be like, yeah, Ed, I would love to start a young adults ministry, but it's not going to be at Messiah. And I think a lot of church leadership might be like, okay, yeah, then what's the point? Like we just said that. And I think there is a lot of strength in that because when it comes to the people that you're caring for, I think it gives a message of like, you're doing this because you care about me and like you see a need, and you're not just doing it because you want me to come back on Sunday or you want me to serve, or, oh, I just learned that you enjoy babies. Do you want to serve in the nursery on Sunday mornings? Like, we're not getting anything out of it from those who are coming. We're just caring for people. And so I've said this in previous episodes, but the reason we knew it needed to be neutral ground, and what I've learned from other groups, is when you have something and you put a stake in the ground and you say, we're hosting it at our church, a majority of people from your church will be in that group. Or I should say a majority of people in that group are from your church.
If not all.
And like very few will come from other churches. Like I think when I did start one at Messiah, there were 3 people out of, I think maybe like 12 of us that were from other churches. And it's only because they were like close friends with others who are in the group. But it becomes this turf war of like, okay, well, I feel like I'm betraying my church and whatnot. Or like, I think church leaders become hesitant to promote it because they don't want their members to leave. And then it's not super accessible or welcoming to those who are unbelievers. Like if I was somebody looking for community and I was not a part of a church, I had no desire to be a part of a church, I could probably find community in other places that are more comfortable to me than walking into a church knowing that we were going to be talking about things that made me uncomfortable, or that I just didn't believe in or don't have thoughts in, or feeling like I'm lesser than because these people have a knowledge that is greater than what I have.
That's a huge statement, what you're saying right now. And I think a lot of churches are going to struggle with what you just said. In fact, I would say for a church, go back and listen again to what you just said. Because I think that goes contrary to a lot of churches, a lot of pastors, like, wait, what do you mean? Why would we want to do it that way? And I think there has to be why are you doing this? Are you doing this self-serving? And maybe that's a judgment call, because you had mentioned before, I mean, you were, without using a word, serving is doing something for somebody with no expectation of a return. But you said sometimes we do ministries like young adult because we really want them to come to our church. And so we do want something. So you made the decision to go off-site and do something very different in a community. And talk a little bit more about what's hard about that.
There's a lot that's hard and there's a lot that's easy and rewarding.
Okay.
Sorry, my mind was going in a different place, and then we rerouted a bit.
Okay, that's right. We'll go with what you're thinking.
Okay. So let's see, jumping back into, okay. So what I was thinking was, I think when and this is also, though it's hard. Okay, great. So when we're saying like, let's have something in the community not affiliated with a church, and it's also going to be just like a community hangout space because of what I just voiced, being like, if I'm somebody walking into, I was just invited to a Bible study and I'm going because I want friends, but I'm also a non-believer. And I think like walking into that, I have felt this like as a believer, like walking into this space of like, what if I don't know as much? What do I do when they're asking questions and they're asking people to voice how they're feeling? And I'm going to sound like a complete idiot because I don't know what they know. I don't know the words that they're using. And I think by saying like, okay, well, let's just create a space where people can feel comfortable, the tension comes where people are like, okay, then it's just void of God, or you are watering down the gospel, or you are lacking boldness to do what God has called us to do and sharing our faith and like using our words and our testimonies to share who Jesus is. And I think that is where my frustration comes in, because I feel really misunderstood when I start to voice like the power of community building, because people do see it as void of God. But I think that is because they are also approaching it as void of God, of like, well, we're just hanging out to hang out. But if you can view those interactions with mission, it changes your entire night. So like when we've been having these hangout nights with this young adults group, Awake 989, it's like like last time we met, we just did spike balling games, because the time before that we did this Christmas in July party, and it ended up being like this huge thing that we planned. And we were like, okay, that was a lot to take care of. Remember why we started this, and remember that we said we wanted to keep it simple. So let's just do something really simple. And so, like I said, we did spike ball and yard games and board games. And there was like a big group of people that were already friends just based on like the last several times of us meeting. Like all of them met at this young adults event, but since they've grown into this like close circle, and there were like 3 people sitting alone, not knowing what to do with themselves. And it's like when you enter into that and you see like, I can go be comfortable with these people that are my friends, but I'm going to sacrifice my whole night of having fun with these people that I know and love to go get to know these people that I have no idea who they are, but they look really lonely and they look uncomfortable. And so I went and sat and played Monopoly, the worst game ever, with these people. And it was wonderful, and it was awesome. And like just getting to hear their stories, and like, I just remember playing this game and I like didn't even remember how to play it. And I'm like losing money rapidly, and they're like trying to help me not lose money, like my opponents, but I'm just here to like talk and get to know them. And so I think when you can view a hangout as like something of intention, it is filled with the mission of God. And like I was saying at the tail end of the episode last week, like Jesus has impacted every single part of my life, and he is still like redeeming parts of it. But it's like when you approach life and interactions and relationships in that way, nothing is void of God. Like, I don't want to put God in a box to say the only place he can move is in a Bible study or in a church. Like, I've seen some of the greatest conversations come from these like nights where we have the space to just hang out and see where the conversation leads, and to have the curiosity of like, why am I talking to this person? Like, why is this person here? And every single time, like, God has been faithful in having like introducing people and conversations that I don't think I ever would have had if we had structured this group in a way that was like meeting at a church doing a Bible study, or even just meeting at a church to hang out.
Can we talk about this a little bit more? Because I think churches, we know from hosting a lot of groups, we're seeing it maybe in a different way. You're just seeing it play out in young adult ministry. But I think churches have the biggest challenge or the biggest struggle with in what way does what we're doing lead people into a relationship with Christ? And that's probably the number one question we get asked. Like, okay, you got an auto shop. Great. That's wonderful. So how are people coming to Christ through the auto shop? And that seems to be a tension that people have in their minds, churches have in their minds, and they almost feel like, well, if we don't bring Jesus into everything that we do, like, I know you're here for car repair, but I want to tell you about Jesus, then they feel like they're not really doing their mission and they're really not serving God. And so I think you're just seeing this play out a little bit in young adult ministry.
Yeah.
And you're probably feeling a little bit the tension. In fact, I would venture to say that there's some people who want to see more evangelistic nature, and others who want to be a little bit more community driven.
Yeah. I think, okay, so I'm having two thoughts. First question is like, are people really asking like how many people are coming to Christ? Like, is that the concern that they're having, or is the concern they're having how many people are becoming active, engaged members at our church? And so I think, again, you have to really ask that question and answer it with honesty of why you're doing an event. And I think when you're having it at your church, I think what I'm doing is different than what most churches are doing. Like, I want this to be helpful to churches. And so they might not start a young adults ministry with neutral ground completely detached from their church. So I also want to speak to the churches who are hosting events at their church.
Yeah.
Because I think those are still valuable, but you have to ask yourself like who it's for and why. So, for example, I was back in Grand Rapids visiting the church that I went to out there, and was talking with a friend afterwards who it's like, we were talking about all of these events that we saw in their bathroom, like posted on the back of the stall door. And she was like, it's interesting because she's like, the only places I've seen these events advertised are in the back of the bathroom stalls. And they were things like, they were like women's events, and they had like a flower arrangement party, and then they had like a s'more and bonfire night, and then like a tea party or something, I think were the 3 upcoming events. And she was like, those seem like they would be really cool things to just invite the community to. But seeing as how I've only seen them advertised for within the church
in the
bathrooms, and like, I'm guessing they were probably on like slides and stuff like that. But it's like, you are really communicating who this is for. It's for people in your church. And I think our hope is like, let's have an event and the community, like, let's hope, fingers crossed, that the community will come. But you really have to start thinking about like, okay, where is this going? Like, who is this actually for? And how do we reach that person? And I would love to do a podcast later on this too, of like communication and marketing for events, because I think that is a really big game changer, but that will be a rabbit trail, so I won't go down that path for now.
So if I can just clarify here, it's either the event is for the church, and maybe the community is invited, or is the event for the community and the church is invited to be a part of it.
Right.
And I think there's 2 really different ways of doing it. Because if you're appealing to the community, you're going to lead it differently than if you're appealing to the church.
Yeah. Right. Lost my train of thought again.
So that's okay. So sometimes it's hard in young adult ministry. I mean, you're experiencing this, so we're just going to talk just a little bit more about. Tell us a little bit more what your events, you've talked about what you're doing. So where does Christ fit into the event the way that you're doing it when you've got like Spike Ball or Christmas in July or board games? What place does God have in that, as opposed to having maybe a worship night or a prayer night or a Bible study night and inviting the same group to those kinds of events?
Yeah.
Because that seems to me like there's a tension there.
Yeah. And we have talked about that as a group of like, because we did have a prayer night and it was awesome. But I did see like things play out in it that I was fearful of.
Like who attended it?
Yeah. So it was, every person who came to the prayer night was a believer, which is to be expected. Like, and we tried to set it up in a way that was like, this is for everybody. Like, we're just going to meet and we're going to have like a reflective space. There will be like instrumental music playing on a speaker just to fill the room with some type of noise. We had different ways that people could engage in prayer. So I printed off like a bunch of questions and posted the questions on the wall around the room and left Post-it notes. So there were things like who in your life are you praying for that has not come to know Jesus yet? People would write names and stick the Post-it note on the wall. We said, like, what needs do you see in the community that we could pray for? People wrote stuff, stuck it on the wall. What areas in your life would you like to see healed that God has not yet healed? Who would you like to see in your life that is healed? So a bunch of questions, just people.
Sounds like an amazing event.
Yeah.
But it bothered you.
Okay, I'm getting there. So we wanted this to be structured for, like, we knew that believers would come to this primarily, but we also wanted it to be an open door for unbelievers to engage in it and maybe like be curious about it. And we didn't want to close that off to them as a possibility either. So we had kind of vocalized, we made a video and said, like, you know, like, if you are somebody who even just like wants, like, you're not about prayer, you've never prayed before, you have no desire to pray, like, we're not going to force you to pray, but like, you're welcome to come and just sit and think. Like, if anything, if you want just like a space removed from noise, if you want a space that is a little bit quieter, like people that care about you there, like, you're welcome to come and just sit and think. And then Brooke and I sat in the back of the room too for anybody who needed like prayer and wanted somebody to pray for them. So, going into the event, we prayed, like the group, me and Brooke, and then like a couple other people who God has like brought into like a little bit more of a leadership role. We all prayed. And one of the guys specifically was like, I feel very led to pray for somebody right now, like someone specifically that has anxiety and is not going to come because of anxiety. So we prayed. And then the event started, and there were maybe like 15 people that came. So it was the lightest in attendance that we've had. But I don't necessarily want to use that as the only metric either.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's just something to be noted. But as the night went on, this guy came to the first event, and he came for 10 minutes and then he left, and we never saw him again at any other night. And I've always wondered like what happened to him.
Yeah.
And he came, and I didn't recognize him at first. And he came up to me, probably like 30 minutes into the prayer night, and was like, I really need prayer. He's like, I don't know if you remember me, but I was here the first night. I left because I had a panic attack. And he was like, I've wanted to come back every single time, but every single time I have a panic attack and I can't come. And he was like, and tonight I really wanted to come, and I was having a panic attack. And he was like, all of a sudden it just stopped, and I knew I needed to come. And I was like,
That's
what?
awesome.
I was like, we prayed for you. Like
Yeah.
we prayed for you specifically. And like, that's so awesome. And so he had asked for prayer that night for a couple different things. And then he's been reaching out a couple more times saying like, remember when you prayed over this thing that night? Like that has since been resolved. And I don't want to disclose like what that was,
No,
but
I wouldn't go there.
yeah.
So who wasn't at that event?
So there were not any unbelievers, and there
Okay.
were 4 people that I really wanted to see again that night. And not necessarily see in the sense of like, I want them to come and experience prayer. Like that would be awesome. But I'm like, I just really want them to be there because I care about them. And it's been really interesting that they have been coming to this group as someone who has no friends, who is an unbeliever, but is willing to engage in the space.
Yeah.
And they did not come. And I've not seen them since. And it really like hurt my heart that they weren't there, because I'm like, to have, and this is the tension that I'm fighting too,
Yeah.
of like, we had this faith-based night, and now, and like all of the unbelievers scattered.
Okay. Can we live in that tension for a minute? Because I think this is where churches are probably going to be like, amen, that's awesome, that's great, that's what she should be doing.
Yeah.
But there's a heart behind this for the missional aspect of community and young adult. And that was absent. And so show me how God shows up in maybe a different model, not a prayer night, but a board game, spike ball, something else.
Yeah.
Where does God show up in those events?
Yeah. I'm going to reflect back on these 4 people specifically that I'm thinking of. So they weren't there the prayer night, right?
Yep.
And I will mention too, like part of this is since we're meeting bi-weekly, it's like, okay, we had this prayer night, and the last time I saw them was 2 weeks ago, and the next time I'll see them from that point is 2 weeks from that point. So it has been a month.
Okay. That's
And
a long
so-
time to be with our community.
Yes. And if you remember from the podcast earlier, and the benefits of college relationships and friendships being that you are within walkable distance, you can have multiple touch points throughout a day of getting to know people, and it escalates really fast on the fast track to getting to know someone and like the depth of who they are. And now, given that context, think about what this is like to go from like, okay, I'm already only seeing these people every other week, and now there's an event in here and I don't feel comfortable going, and the next time I will be able to see these people is a whole month from when I saw them last. That part like really broke my heart of like, we made this inaccessible. And I think that's where you're saying too, like churches are, or whoever might be like, but that is what we're called to do as believers. And if it makes the world uncomfortable, like we've been told that it is going to make the world uncomfortable, and we are not called to be like, we're called to be in the world, but not of the world. And like all this stuff that it's like, yes, that is true. But like God can love the world through you because he is in you.
Let's talk about that. Go deeper into that, because I think this is where churches need to hear. You can have a community event and we have Christ in us, and God is present through all of it. So maybe talk more from that angle, because I think churches really need to hear this.
Yeah. So, I mean, from the nights that we've had, just the hangout nights, one of the people I'm thinking of specifically, we had a movie night and we were grilling hot dogs. And I've noticed him at past events, like he provides a lot of stuff. He shows up with a cooler full of like popsicles every time. Like he is constantly like, I think, wanting to contribute something, but I think he has, he's a little bit more on the outskirts, and not a lot of people will give him the time in conversation. And so, that's where my eyes go to specifically in most events, is looking for people who are not feeling included.
Yeah.
And so he brought like a ton of hot dogs that night that we had the movie night. And while everybody was like, the movie was getting set up, people were like talking, they were playing. We also had like yard games out that night. He just immediately went to where he was comfortable and started grilling hot dogs alone. And so like I went over and I just stood and talked with him while he grilled hot dogs. And we spent probably, actually like the whole movie was him and I just like, he was grilling hot dogs and we were just talking. And you hear about his life. And again, I'm not going to disclose everything that's going on in his life, but it's like really like heart level conversations happened there. And it wasn't just surface level. It wasn't just like, you know, shooting the breeze, but it was like hard stuff. And I feel like that is also the beauty of community events, because there's something special that happens, I think, in the depth and like spirit of a person when your physical body is engaging in something. So he's just like flipping hot dogs, staring at the grill the whole time. But I think that gave him almost this like barrier between us where he felt safe, and like his heart, he could share his heart from that point. I think a lot of conversations happen around ping pong tables. I think a lot of conversations happen around like games where it's like that board game and Monopoly. There's no way I was winning that thing, but like I didn't care about winning. I just wanted to talk and like get to know people. And I think that's the point of using like things that you can engage with in a physical way, and like having that be like, you just feel a lot safer somewhere.
It sounds like a lot more patience is required from God's perspective, because if you do a prayer night, it's just like, okay, we're going to just really appeal to believers in a spiritual way, lead them in prayer. It sounds like when you're going for those who may be further away from the Lord, you have to do things like just hang out with somebody while they're grilling hot dogs, sit down and play a game that you really don't care about, watch a movie that you actually never watched the movie, just because you're with somebody and spending more time with somebody and watching for those opportunities, whether to be Jesus to them or sometimes to share.
Yeah. And at least like from where I would like to see this group is like, because these are conversations that we're having currently of like, where do faith-based things fit into this? We're having a worship night next week. So it's like the frequency of those is currently being decided. It's hard. But I will speak from my perspective alone in this, is that like, because this space is not void of God, because we have Jesus lives in us, like God is shared, and the heart of God is shared with people through conversations, through simple interactions. But I also don't want to remove the opportunity for someone, if the Lord is working in their heart, to take it a step deeper into relationship with him. And I think this really naturally comes out really naturally comes out because of who we are as Christians, and who we are in Jesus, and who we are in like spending our time with him, like how we spend our time. And so from this group, like we haven't talked about this at this point, but I've mentioned this a couple times, there have been like 2 other people that have like stepped more into like a leadership capacity, and they are also believers. And after the movie night one night, we actually, we had a ton of leftover hot dogs, and someone was like, I really feel like we need to take these downtown to people who are homeless and just feed people. And it was like midnight, and we were like, okay. So we went, and we ended up sitting with 4 people who were drunk out of their minds. But like they were going through really hard life stuff. And we sat with them until 2 a.m, just talking with them and hearing their story. And like they were all over the place. But at the end of the night, the 4 of us who were from this young adults group were like, I think these people that we just talked with, I don't think anybody has ever listened to them in their life. And we could just be an ear to them. So from this group where that night we planned a movie night, something really like spiritual, faith-based, Jesus was there with us happened, and we didn't plan it. And that stuff organically happens because of who we are in Christ. And so I think you can rest knowing that you don't have to schedule like a revival. You don't have to schedule things to exist that are like specific to spiritual disciplines, because naturally, if you are disciplined in that way, you will invite people into that space. And so it's like my hope is that people will engage with this young adults group and get to know one another, and the model of how Jesus did ministry being come with me will happen because we have Jesus in us. So it's not just up to me, but it is up to every single believer in that group to be missional, and not in a way that is bait and switch, not in a way that is come to my church and serve. Eventually it could get there and people can live really like engaged lives with Christ. But it is just the simple, like, hey, we're grilling hot dogs and I've gotten to know you over the last couple hours and the last several times we've been meeting. Hey, we have like a worship night actually coming up. That's a completely separate thing from this event, but would you want to go? Or I really enjoy going on prayer walks and we just pray and walk. Would you want to come with me? And it's like, just because that event is not centered around that thing doesn't mean it's void of God, unless you make it void of God.
You know, what I think is really interesting when churches struggle with this, think about it from the perspective of somebody who isn't a Christ follower, doesn't know the Lord, isn't a believer, and a group of Christians just go and they hang out together. That person's getting to be with God whether they realize it or not. Like nothing spiritual has to happen. Nothing evangelistic has to happen. Nothing missional has to happen. Just to be present. And I think sometimes God just wants people to know that he's with them and sends us into places to be Christ. We've got Christ in us. Just go. Would you just go be with that person?
Yeah.
I want them to know that they're not alone, that I'm really with them saying God. And you just need to go and show up, whether it's grilling hot dogs, whether it's playing a game, just to be with that person. And from God's perspective, that's probably enough.
Yeah. And you know what's really cool too is I think it was the last episode I mentioned this in, of like being in a space with a bunch of like crisis response callers and like counselors, social workers. And when they had heard of this group, they were like, we have so many people calling in that have this need. Is it okay if we refer them to your group? And I like felt this weight in the best way of like, Jesus, send them, like give me all of the messy people, give me the people that the rest of the world doesn't want, the rest of people are uncomfortable by, like send them, because I want to meet them. I want to know them. I want them to know the heart of God. And I am excited for like the possibility of that, but it also makes me nervous of like, okay, because some of these counselors had mentioned too, they were like, is this like a strictly Lutheran thing? Is this a church thing? And I was like, it's just a community group for people. And they're like, great. But it's like, if we were to say we're meeting at this church and we're doing this Bible study, these social workers and counselors and crisis response people are probably not going to say on the phone to someone who is struggling with suicide, you should join this Bible study at this church. Like, when they're looking for community, and they probably wouldn't come. And so it's like, I think it is important, listeners, if like I could encourage you in any way, like get to know someone that doesn't know you or doesn't know Christ. I was talking to a friend this past week and shared exactly what I just shared with like the crisis response stuff. And she was brought to tears And she was like, I don't know anybody who's not a Christian. And she's like, but I want him there. I want him there so bad. And she was like, I have this fire in me now. And I'm like, I hope all of these people actually refer these people that are struggling to this group, and I'm ready for them. Because, and I'm saying that because it's like, if you don't know somebody who doesn't know Christ, who are you fighting for? Like, you're fighting for someone theoretical. Like, get to know someone that you are going to fight the fight for them to be there and know who God is and do whatever it takes to like create that space for them.
It's pretty amazing when you stop and think about that group, that suicide prevention that you were at for training. Here's a group of people that you had indicated to me. Many of them, it seems to be, are not Christ followers. And here they're willing to send all of their clients that are struggling with depression, with suicide, with lack of community, sending them to a place where Christ is. And sometimes you just have to smile at God that you created a safe place where everybody's welcome. So God is going to use people who don't know Christ to send all these people your way so that you can love them, care for them, hopefully prevent them from taking their life, and really have a chance to just love and serve them and minister to them.
Yeah.
That God gets to minister to them in a way that never would have happened, as you said, if it was in a church.
Yeah.
So God is powerfully using this ministry to change a lot of lives.
I hope so.
He is.
He is currently. Yes.
He is. Even just that, I mean, how many were in this group that you got trained with?
Like 30 at the suicide prevention training.
And they're all, what did you tell me? They're all social workers. And
Yep. Yeah. They were all like social workers, behavioral health, counselors, crisis response.
not church people.
No.
I mean,
I think
really
they were like, it was me
agencies.
and 2 other staff from Messiah that were the only, yeah.
And yet God used that in such a powerful way to bring a lot of people. I'm excited about all the people that are going to come seeking
Yeah.
and finding God and not realizing that they're looking for God, but they're going to find Christ along the way.
Have you heard, I know we're kind of, we're past here on time, but what's another minute? Have you heard Louis Giglio's story called like Fruitcake and Ice Cream?
Go ahead and share it.
It is, have you heard it?
I have.
Okay.
But go ahead and share it.
I listened to it this morning, and if you're listening, like go listen to this after it. It's only like 25 minutes. But it's this story of this girl, Ashley, who leaves a journal. She has a journal, she's written in it, and to kind of make a long story short, she's living in ways of the world. She's partying, she's drinking, she's sleeping around, and her life kind of starts to crack, and you see that in her journal as he's reading through it. And throughout her journal, she gets like a new roommate, and her new roommate's name is like Christina. And she's like, and Christina's kind of a fruitcake because she is like, she goes to church, and she said the best night of her life was going to this passion conference with 20,000 other people. And she's like, this girl's really got to figure out a better way to live if that's the most fun that she's had. And like, it kind of expresses in this journal, this like intrigue of this roommate that has like, she's like, this fruitcake, she keeps referring to her as a fruitcake. She keeps showing up, and I'm really struggling. And I got out a tub of ice cream, and I was eating the ice cream after like this really rough night that I had. And she's asking me about it. And this fruitcake is like sitting in front of me and actually listening. And she says she's a Christian, but like, she's not like most Christians. And I feel like I'm not judged by her. I feel like I'm not criticized, but she's just here to love me, and it feels different. And she's just going on and on in this journal, over the course of like, I don't know, like a year that Louis Giglio's like reading through this. And eventually she like gives her life to Christ. And I don't know, I feel bad for spoiling it, but she gets in a car accident and passes like 2 weeks after she gives her life to Christ. And the father of Ashley gave this journal to Louis Giglio as a gift, because in it she had written about how she gave her life to Christ because she had heard a message that her friend Christina had introduced her to. And so he gave it as a gift to see like that transformation happen. But it's like what I read or listened to in that story just this morning, listening to it, was like this year where Christina and Ashley were living as roommates, And Christina just showed up. Like, it talks about them going on runs together. It talks about Christina driving her to get her car from the auto shop. It talks about like late nights where Ashley is having in crisis mode after a breakup and Christina is there. And so it's like, that is the thing. That's exactly what we're talking about in this. Mm-hmm. This is not just Christina and Ashley hanging out and going for a run for no purpose. This is the mission of God activated through his people, where Ashley got to know the heart of God through someone that has Jesus in them. And so I'm like, that ministry happens at the speed of relationship. And that was a year's time that this journal took place. So
sometimes the church just has to show up and be Jesus and not do anything more. Mm-hmm. Lyndsay, it's been a great conversation. And thanks so much, everybody, for listening today. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Beyond the Breakwater, a podcast of Elevate Community Ministries. Don't let the conversation stop here. You can email us at hello@beyondthebreakwater.org. We would love to chat with you, answer questions, plan a visit, and help you take your next step. We'll see you next week.